talk on this important aspect, we have in our studios Dr. Usman Chohan. He is the advisor on economic affairs to the president of Center for Aerospace and Security Studies, CASS. Most welcome to you, Dr. Thank you very much for your presence here. And with him, Ms. Ishil Arooj. She is an economic analyst. Thank you very much, Ishil, for your presence here. And online joining us, Dr. Hassan Zafar, all the way from Lahore. He is a political economy analyst. Thank you very much, Dr. Hassan, for your presence online. My first question is to you, Dr. Usman, that as we all know that the Trump administration's decision to cancel more than 80% of the programs under the US Agency for International Development, USAID, how it is going to impact Pakistan. It has suspended at least $845 million, more than 39 important projects. You have all the details in energy, economy, education, healthcare, and all that. So it's all happening when Pakistan's economy is really fragile, and we have very squeezed budget when it comes to the social sector development. So how do you see what sort of impacts we are facing now under this decision particularly?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your show. It's always a pleasure to be with you. The decision to cut USAID is very significant for developing countries because the sorts of things, broadly speaking, I know that there are some criticisms of some programs, but broadly speaking, many of these things were of a critical or life-saving nature in the developing world. Life-saving medicines in sub-Saharan Africa, water purification in the desert regions of South Asia or the Middle East. Many things of this sort have an enormous impact relative to their cost. And so you can look at the converse.
By the way, those life-saving medicines were also included in the, when we are talking about tuberculosis and some sort of...
Absolutely.
So that is also included there.
Absolutely. So you can look at the converse of this and see that if you remove these things, you are leading to the deaths of people. It's very simple. And I don't lay the blame in any way on Donald Trump for this, because these decisions are being made by the Department of Government Efficiency. And their attitude towards the destruction of lives is not just third world lives, they're destroying American lives now with decisions such as trying to undermine Social Security, which is a legitimate right for anybody paying into the system. They are putting American lives in jeopardy as well. And whatever efficiencies they think they can gain from this, the public value destruction that is caused in their country and in the rest of the world is staggering in its amount. So for a low investment, they got huge returns. Now they're going to actually lead to the destruction of lives.
Your point well taken. Dr. Usman, how will the closure of over 60 health facilities previously funded by USAID affect the 1.7 million people in Pakistan, including 1.2 million of the Afghan refugees as well, who relied on these services? And those healthcare workers are actually separate to be impacted, while $52 million of the Global Health Supply Chain Program, which was designed to ensure the availability of essential and critical medical supplies, would also has lots of impacts on Pakistan. What impact would be on the women empowerment, the gender equality initiative, the polio eradication, the water and sanitation, because water and sanitation is also linked with polio eradication. And then if you don't have the critical medicines and all others, so that is the area going to impact further. So how do you see overall scenario?
Well, yes, as Isha had mentioned, the short-term consequences are dire. In the long term, there might be some adjustment, which is good, but you will certainly see, and this is tragic to say, sickness and death spread throughout the third world. And this will create acute distress. The mortality rates will see a tick up, and it will be very difficult for the people who are already at the very margins of the societies they live in to survive. But the truth is, again, that DOGE has this mindset not just of doing this to the third world by cutting some minor amount for the US budget, it's a tiny amount, but it made such a huge difference. It's also doing this in the United States. And so you're seeing things like a measles outbreak in Texas. Measles was not something you would expect in the US. So it seems like the plan for DOGE is not just to ignore the third world, but also to turn the US into a third world country. And I think that that is not a good response to even the failures of foreign assistance. Foreign aid has its own problems. We've seen in the 20th century. We know that there's limitations with that. But the ambition of that was to bring everybody else to the first world. The counter proposal that DOGE gives you is, why don't we make everybody third world? And then we'll be all right. So I disagree with this mindset of Elon Musk very severely.
So right now DOGE is actually dodging United States as well. So what Ishil said, Dr. Usman, how will the suspension of the USAID's $86 million integrated health system strengthening and service delivery program impact Pakistan's healthcare overall? The infrastructure that was relied upon that. So what challenges might arise in managing future health crisis without such a critical support, especially when we are talking about in the short term?
Yes, in the short run, again, the point is that these healthcare systems have been made vulnerable. But the truth is that it might be a wake-up call for developing countries that have good endowments. Pakistan, alhamdulillah, is a country that is blessed with enormous endowments.
Yes.
What Ms. Ishil has pointed out about the funding being the issue is true, but that is something we can fix, because the provincial governments in Pakistan do have a ton of money. And if you ask them later, once they retire and they can speak openly, why don't you work on this stuff? They admit to a lack of interest in the subject. And I think that the fact that there is a crisis now, stimulated by USAID's collapse, is that the provincial governments have to step in. A lot of the blame is put on the federation, but healthcare and education are provincial subjects. And I can guarantee you there is enough money with the Sindh government to keep the water purification going in Jamshoro, which was done by USAID. The fact that NGOs even exist in our country means that the state has fallen behind in some way. But the state we always think of as a monolithic entity based in Islamabad and Rawalpindi, but that's not it. The state expands outwards into the periphery through down to local government. And if we reconcile our budget with the needs, public value needs of our people, there is no reason why NGOs would need to do that. There would be something like a larger corporate sector, or philanthropy would exist because we're a generous people. But the fact is that we do have the resources to take it up. But it isn't easy to do it immediately. And your question is about the immediate part. The immediacy of this is very dire. So that's because Trump is doing things immediately, left, right, and center, and he's wreaking havoc everywhere. That's not just Elon Musk,
so
that's him.
If your point get along, so Dr. Usman, what would be the ultimate impact of halt of the governance, reduction in corruption, the transparency initiative, religious, ethnic, and the political harmony in Pakistan, when USAID was actually supporting democratic governance, administrative system, and transparency with $15 million initiative, particularly in our tribal districts, erstwhile FATA, what we call the merged areas governance program, with $40.7 million, fostering religious, ethnic, and the political harmony through $9 million for building peace in Pakistan program. So how do you see, because these are the areas right now, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is suffering the worst kind of terrorism, including the tribal districts which are adjacent to the Pak-Afghan border. So when the funding is gone, so how these areas are going to sustain, because that funding was really a pivot for their development and development for the democratic norms and all other things over there. So what would be the ultimate impact?
I think this is a very good example of something that USAID was contributing to in a positive way, which is giving human capital development to people who have responsibilities. So people who are working in the middle rung of institutions, whether it's judiciary or things like that, by getting that exposure to best practices from abroad, they did get a leg up. And you would see this over the careers of people in Pakistan as they would retire. They would have more human capital, more exposure, thanks to programs like this. So it was a very positive thing. And I can add to what Ms. Ishal said about giving people hope and then taking it away. I think this is the US's biggest export now. What do you think they did to the Afghan people after 20 years and then taking it? What do you think they've done to Ukraine right now? Just giving hope and then taking it back abruptly. I think this is the American supreme expertise now, and Donald Trump's supreme export in reconciling his deficit. The other point is, though, that there are ways for us to work around this immediate disruption to mitigate its damage. Of course, as Ms. Ishal has correctly said, the damage is abrupt and sudden, but there are ways. For example, what if those kids on those scholarships abroad are now funded by those rich university endowments of those 30 universities? American universities are so rich and they have such huge endowments. Perhaps those universities which are extracting from Americans and outsiders can show a little bit of compassion.
But why not the well-off Pakistanis inside the country and outside the country and abroad?
Sure.
Why not to support these students through our own resources?
Certainly.
And that is going to contribute.
But
really.
even if you have private donors here supporting, you're supporting a tuition fee charged by that university, which is extortionary. The university has some responsibility, I feel.
Definitely, you are right. Dr. Usman, very brief. Do you not think that this ongoing political backlash against the USAID by the new ruling elite in Washington impact US influence over policy making in developing countries, particularly Pakistan? To what extent does this shift is actually create a strategic opportunity for the global players like China? China is going to invest in the social sector protection. And then the BRICS nations to reshape international development and global health governance overall.
I think this is the most important part that you have mentioned. The fact is that the US had a soft power capital because of this. It was able to influence people subtly rather than by force. Now it has given this instrument it had away for free to other countries to occupy. Other countries can easily put this low rate investment to get a high return now, and this will be the most damaging thing because Trump didn't understand what being a superpower is. Superpowers work through persuasion, and that's what makes them superpowers as opposed to middle powers. So this persuasion part is now gone, and I don't think anybody wants to listen to America right now. Not even Canada, not even EU.
Your point well taken. Your point well taken. Thank you very much, Dr. Usman, for being with us here in the studio.